Let me ask you a question. What would happen if the very currency that holds the global financial system together suddenly did something nobody expected, something that defied all the stories people have been told for years? What would happen if the dollar, instead of weakening and fading away like so many experts have been predicting, actually went in the opposite direction? Stronger, more powerful, shaking economies, businesses, and governments across the world. Because that is exactly what is happening, and it is about to do the unthinkable again. Don't you believe me? Stay until the end and you will see it, so leave a like and let's start. Now, maybe you have heard this before. The idea that the dollar is dying, that countries are dumping it, that a new reserve currency is about to replace it. You hear about de-dollarization, about gold taking back its throne, about the Chinese yuan, or maybe some BRICS currency leading the way. The headlines sound dramatic. They make you believe the dollar is finished. But let me tell you something. Each time people start celebrating the end of the dollar, each time they say America is done, the opposite happens. The dollar rises. And not just a little. It surges, leaving a trail of weaker currencies and shattered expectations in its path. The truth is, the dollar doesn't need to be liked. It doesn't need people to cheer for it. It doesn't even need politicians to defend it with speeches. The dollar is powered by something deeper, something hidden in the wiring of the global financial system. And every time the world economy slows down, every time fear takes hold, the dollar steps up, demanding more and more value. That's what people forget. The dollar thrives on chaos. Just look at what's been happening recently. The dollar has been climbing against almost every other major currency. The Japanese yen crushed. The Indian rupee sinking to record lows. The Korean won, falling. The Canadian and New Zealand dollars both weakening. Even the mighty euro and the British pound are sliding. This isn't some small random movement. It's synchronized, almost as if the entire world is moving in the same direction. And that direction is straight into the hands of the dollar. Think about this. People were waiting for a so-called second half rebound in the global economy. Politicians said it. Analysts repeated it. But the rebound never came. Instead, what rebounded was the dollar. And that tells you something important. When the dollar rises like this, it is not a sign of strength in the global economy. It is a signal of weakness, of tightening, of stress. It means money is becoming harder to find, more expensive to borrow, more costly to use. The dollar doesn't rise because the world is healthy. It rises because the world is sick. Do you remember how many times in the past people claimed the dollar was being dumped? Take last year, for example. They said foreign investors were selling America, that the rest of the world was moving away. But if you looked closely, that wasn't true at all. What really happened was something different. It wasn't about too many dollars. It was about too few of them. That's the story people miss again and again. A rising dollar is not the world rejecting America. It is the world desperately trying to get more dollars and not being able to. It's a shortage. This isn't the first time we've seen this play out. In fact, it's a pattern that repeats again and again. When markets panic, when global trade slows, when credit conditions tighten, the dollar shoots higher. And every time experts scramble to explain it away. They say it's temporary. They say it's just about interest rates. They say central banks will fix it. But history shows us something very different. Once the dollar begins to rise like this, it sets off a chain reaction. Economies weaken, debt costs explode, trade shrinks, and governments are forced into desperate measures. That's the unthinkable. The very thing they said would never happen is happening again. Look at South Korea. Their government tried to stop their currency from falling. They intervened, using billions to keep the won from sliding past a critical level. But it didn't work. The dollar just kept grinding higher. Look at Japan. Their yen is slipping toward 150 again, and every time they try to push it back, the market just shrugs and keeps moving. Look at Canada and New Zealand. Both economies are slowing, jobs are being lost, and their currencies are sliding in perfect synchronization. Look at India, where the rupee has been a warning signal for years, showing us where dollar shortages appear first. Now it's crashing again, hitting record lows, and not even the Reserve Bank of India can hold it back. Everywhere you look, it's the same story. Different countries, same outcome. Currencies falling, the dollar rising. And that's because this isn't about one country or another. It's not about one central bank or one decision. It's about the entire global system, the plumbing of money itself. The world runs on dollars, and when dollars become scarce, it affects everyone. Think of it this way. Imagine a giant party where everyone needs a ticket to get inside. That ticket is the dollar. When tickets are easy to find, people can dance, they can celebrate, they can enjoy themselves. But when the tickets start running out, suddenly the price to get in shoots up. People start fighting over tickets. Some are left outside in the cold. That's what a rising dollar really means. It's the world paying a higher and higher price just to keep playing the game. And here's the twist. A rising dollar doesn't just hurt other countries, it comes back to hurt the United States too. Because when the dollar goes up, American exports become more expensive, companies lose profits overseas, and financial markets feel the strain. It's like a boomerang. The dollar rises because the world is weak, and then that rising dollar makes the weakness worse, including inside America itself. This is why the dollar's unthinkable move is so dangerous. It doesn't just shift numbers on a chart, it reshapes the global economy. It creates winners and losers, and most of the time, there are far more losers than winners. Countries lose control over their currencies. Central banks lose credibility. Companies lose access to funding. And ordinary people, whether they realise it or not, feel the impact through higher prices, lost jobs, and shrinking opportunities. And the most chilling part, each time this happens, it's not a small adjustment. It's a stage in a bigger cycle. A downturn that unfolds in waves. Last year we saw the first stage, a huge spike in the dollar, as fear spread. Then came a brief reprieve, a little pause that made some think the worst was over. But that was just an illusion. Now the second stage has begun. Since July, the dollar has been climbing again, slowly but steadily, breaking through levels that once seemed impossible. And that's why I say the dollar is about to do the unthinkable. Again. Because the last time it happened, people were caught off guard. They weren't ready for what it meant. They thought it was just a temporary move. But this time, if you look closely, the signs are everywhere. The dollar is not just rising. It is sending a message, a warning. So what exactly is this warning? What is the dollar telling us? It is saying that the global system is under pressure, that the promises of growth and recovery are breaking down, that the so-called rebound people were waiting for is not coming. Instead of a second half recovery, what we have is a second half dollar surge. That's the unthinkable part. Because most people still don't believe the dollar can rise when the United States itself is struggling. They think a weak economy should mean a weak dollar. But the opposite is true. When the world loses confidence, when money becomes scarce, the dollar is the last safe harbour, and the more fear spreads, the higher it climbs. Take China. For years, China's been pushing out production, even when the rest of the world didn't need it. It was like forcing factories to run just to keep people employed. But that created oversupply, which pushed prices lower across the globe. Now China's changing direction. They are producing less, cutting back, trying to adjust. But less production means fewer jobs, slower growth, and even more pressure on the system. The dollar is reflecting that shift too. When China slows, it doesn't just affect Asia, it ripples everywhere. Or look at Europe. They hoped inflation would finally come under control, that growth would return, that the crisis would ease. But instead, they are now facing the same squeeze as everyone else. Credit is tight. Consumers are cautious. Businesses are shrinking. And what's happening to their currencies? They're falling. The euro, the pound, all weaker against the dollar. The dollar is rising not because the US is healthy, but because everyone else is unhealthy. Now here's where it gets really dangerous. Every time the dollar spikes, it creates hidden losses in the financial system. Banks, funds, and institutions that borrowed in dollars suddenly have to pay back more. It's like owing money in a currency that keeps getting stronger. Debts grow heavier, balance sheets crack, and risks multiply. That's what makes the dollar so explosive. It's not just about exchange rates, it's about the weight of trillions in obligations tied to it. When the dollar rises, those obligations become unbearable. And you might be wondering, hasn't the Federal Reserve done enough? Haven't they raised rates, then cut them, then promised stability? Yes, they've tried, but the truth is, even the Fed doesn't fully control this. The dollar is bigger than any single central bank. It's tied to a network of global lending, shadow banking, offshore markets, and hidden leverage. When that machine starts demanding more dollars, even Jerome Powell can only react. He can't stop it. He can't reverse the tide. Think about the timing too. Why did this new surge begin right at the start of July, the exact halfway mark of the year? Some say it's coincidence, maybe it is, but it also fits with patterns we've seen before. Financial systems don't always move smoothly. They shift in stages, often triggered by calendar points, policy resets, or big trade adjustments. And in this case, July marked the beginning of a clear reversal. Currencies that had been rebounding began to sink again. The dollar that had briefly cooled off started heating up once more. And since then, the trend has only grown stronger. And yet many people still don't see it. They are distracted by headlines about politics, about elections, about stock market rallies. They think everything is fine because one piece of data looks good, or because GDP was revised upward for a single quarter. But beneath the surface, the pressure is building. The dollar is showing us the truth. And the truth is, weakness is spreading, fear is rising, and the cycle is turning darker. If you want proof, just look at how synchronized everything is. Canada, New Zealand, South Korea, Japan, India, Europe. Different regions, different policies, different economies, yet all of them moving in the same direction at the same time. That doesn't happen by accident. It happens when the global system itself is tightening, when the dollar is pulling everything toward it, like gravity. And here's the part that makes it unthinkable. The more the dollar rises, the more it strangles growth. The more it strangles growth, the more fear spreads. And the more fear spreads, the higher the dollar goes. It becomes a self-reinforcing cycle. And once that cycle begins, it's almost impossible to stop until something breaks. That's why countries are desperate. That's why central banks are cutting rates again, even after saying inflation was their biggest worry just months ago. That's why governments intervene in currency markets trying to hold the line, only to see their efforts fail. Because when the dollar is on the move, almost nothing can stand in its way. And what about ordinary people? What does this mean for you? It means that the cost of living could rise, even as wages stagnate. It means that businesses could cut jobs, even as stock markets look strong on the surface. It means that debts could become harder to pay, even if interest rates fall. Because this isn't about local conditions. It's about a global squeeze that filters down to every household, every business, every worker. History shows us how this ends. The dollar spikes, economies weaken, central banks scramble, and eventually crises emerge. Sometimes it takes the form of a banking panic. Sometimes it takes the form of a debt crisis in emerging markets. Sometimes it shows up as a sharp recession in developed countries. But the pattern is always the same. A rising dollar pushes the system until something snaps. And right now we are entering that stage again. The dollar is not just moving, it is accelerating. It is crossing thresholds, breaking barriers, forcing governments to react. And it is happening at a moment when the world can least afford it. Growth is already weak. Confidence is already shaky. Debt is already high. And into that fragile mix, the dollar is pouring fuel. So when I say the dollar is about to do the unthinkable, again, this is what I mean. It is about to rise further, tighten conditions more, and unleash consequences few are prepared for. It won't matter what politicians say. It won't matter what central bankers promise. The dollar is bigger than their words. It is the tide that lifts or sinks all boats. And right now, it is rising. Let me leave you with this thought. The last time the dollar spiked like this, it revealed cracks in the system that few had noticed. This time the cracks are even bigger and the system is even weaker. The unthinkable is not that the dollar is dying. The unthinkable is that the dollar is rising again, and that rise will shape everything from trade to jobs to savings. If you're watching closely, you can see the signs everywhere. The dollar is telling us the truth. The question is, are we listening? Because when the dollar does the unthinkable, the entire world feels it. And once it starts, there's no turning back until the cycle runs its course. The story of the dollar is not one of slow decline, but of sudden and violent moves that catch almost everyone by surprise. It rises when the world is weakest. It rises when fear spreads, and it rises when people least expect it. That's the unthinkable reality. And it's happening again right before our eyes. So the next time you hear someone say the dollar is finished, remember what history shows us. The dollar doesn't die in silence. It roars back in strength. And every time it does, it reshapes the global economy. The unthinkable is not tomorrow. The unthinkable is already here. So to stay always protected, you can subscribe to this channel and let me know your thoughts in the comments. See you soon. Just a reminder, I'm not a financial advisor. This video is for educational purposes only, and any results depend on your own decisions and actions.